Hello everyone, my name is Jolanda Maas. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Clinical Neuro and Developmental Psychology at the VU Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Today I would like to tell you a bit more about the importance of green schoolyards for children in elementary schools. I've been studying the effects of green schoolyards for the past 10 years now. And I see large effects, and I hope that in the end of this presentation you will have the same idea and are all inspired to green your own schoolyards. I would like to start today with a short assignment. I would like to ask you to imagine yourself being a child again. And then I would like to ask you, where would you rather have played? Would that be in an environment like this? Or would you say, no, I would prefer an environment like this? If you would prefer to have played in this more natural environment, I would like to ask you to stand up. Of course, I cannot really see what's happening now in the audience, but I hope and think that most of you stood up. At least that is what we see when I do this exercise in a normal presentation. I see that most of the people stand up and have a preference for playing in a natural environment. This is not strange, because if we look into our evolutionary history, we can see that most of the time we have evolved in an environment with a lot of nature around us. So we are used to that environment. And according to the biophilia hypothesis, we have an innate tendency to seek connections with nature. And if we connect to nature, we will get happier and healthier. So if we know that, and we knew that in 1984 when this hypothesis was posed, that we would get healthier and happier if we connect to green space, then it's strange to realize that lots of children nowadays live in urban areas. So in these urban areas, they are hardly exposed to these natural environments. So in their daily lives, children are not exposed to nature anymore. And for instance, if I ask my parents where they used to play in nice green areas. But that's not the case anymore. And we can see that nowadays children suffer from several problems. We see more and more children who are overweight. We see more and more children who wear glasses because they sit behind a screen too often. Children play outside less often than they used to. And we also have more societal problems, like for instance problems concerning biodiversity, problems concerning climate change, like for instance extreme heat in the summer. And the nice thing about greening schoolyards of elementary schools is that with this one intervention, so with greening the schoolyards, you can provide a solution for all these problems. You can stimulate children's development, increase biodiversity, and make the schoolyard more climate resilient. So what do we know about the importance of connecting children to nature? Well, actually, if you look at literature, you can see that if people play more in natural environments, that can influence all developmental areas in children. So for instance, children are more physically active if they live in a greener living environment. They play outside more often. We can also see that children who grow their own food eat healthier. And if we look at the cognitive development of children, we can see that, for instance, children can perform math tasks better in a natural environment than when they are indoors. We can also see that younger children who play at green schoolyards use more words to explain their game when they're playing. And therefore their language skills improve if they play in natural school grounds. If we then look at the socio-emotional development, we can see that if you play with nature and you do that together with other children, you have to talk to each other about what you want to do. The goals and the aims of the play, they are not beforehand very certain or sure. And therefore you have to discuss things with each other. And that creates a bond between children. And also we have the moral development. If children are connected to nature, morally they develop in a better way. What we see is that children who have been exposed during childhood with nature, they often take care for nature when they are older. So that's why it's really important to connect children to nature, because you can influence all these developmental areas in a positive way. If we then look at greening schoolyards of elementary schools, then we can see that that's a really interesting intervention, because you can influence connection to nature for all children, because all children go to the elementary schools. And we performed an interesting study on the effects of greening schoolyards. In this study, we investigated the effects of greening in 9 schools in the Netherlands. 5 of these schools greened their schoolyards and 4 didn't. So we could compare the effects of greening schoolyards. We had measures directly after greening and a year later. So we could look at the short-term and longer-term effects of greening schoolyards. What we saw is that at these green schoolyards, children and especially girls play more intensively, so they are more physically active when they play at a green schoolyard. We could also see that they play differently. So where you see most physical play on grey schoolyards, we can see at green schoolyards that there's also exploring and manipulating play and more creative and fantasy play. So there's more diverse play at a green schoolyard. We can also see that children, for instance, can concentrate better. We know from literature that if you look at green spaces, that it reduces stress and it also helps you to concentrate better. And we saw that. So we did some tasks before the recess and after, and we saw that after the break, if children had played on a green schoolyard, they could concentrate better. We also saw that children were bullied less often, so there was less bullying at schools with the green schoolyard, and children were more creative at green schoolyards. So all in all, we can say that indeed, if you green schoolyards, it can have a positive effect on several developmental areas in children. Then the next question would be, how can we optimally design these green schoolyards? In the Netherlands, we see an increase in the number of green schoolyards from about 20%. So, but then if we go to these green schoolyards and look at how they are designed, often the schoolyards contain some kind of artificial grass and a lot of wooden play equipment. And if you put down those elements at a green schoolyard, then you haven't really understood what a green schoolyard should look like. Because what is really important in a green schoolyard is that children can play with loose materials, that they can make their own play. And also that they can build, can explore. So we don't need wooden play equipment. We need surfaces like this, like a lot of sand, like a water element, and also more things like climbing elements or places where children can hide. Those are really important elements. Because we saw that in Dutch schoolyards that they weren't optimally designed, we started a new research project in which we investigated or wanted to find out how to optimally design these schoolyards. We asked a lot of experts in the Netherlands who had experience with greening schoolyards to think about what an ideal green schoolyard should look like. And in the end, we came up with an instrument, the Green Schoolyard evaluation tool, which basically states the elements that you have to include in a green schoolyard. So if you want to build a green schoolyard that optimally influences children's development, biodiversity and climate change, you should definitely look at this tool that we made, which is publicly available because we published about it. And if we then look at the content of this tool, we can see, for instance, that that a green schoolyard should contain diverse types of green space. So a lot of flowers, different trees, for instance. That, of course, at a schoolyard you should be able to climb, to swing, to be physically active. So those things are also important, and you have to think about those things in your design. And also look at places where animals can reside, basically. So there are a lot of important things that these green schoolyards should consist. So it goes a bit too far to go through the whole tool, but I think and I hope that with this information you will look at the tool and use it when designing a green schoolyard in your own environment. There are a few more things that are really important if you start greening a schoolyard. The first thing is that it's really important that you do it bottom up and not top down. So it should not be only the director of a school who says, okay, we're going to green, and then he starts greening the schoolyard. You should involve parents, children, people in the neighborhood, and maybe also youth in the neighborhood. Because if you involve them, that will encourage them also to feel ownership of this environment, and then they will be more inclined to take care of the environment. A second important thing is that it's good to realize that maintenance of a green schoolyard costs more money. It's all worth it because it has several benefits for the environment and the children, but it's good to realize, and it's also a message you should convey to the schools. And the last important thing is that right now what we often see is that these schoolyards are only used during recess. That's interesting because children can play there, but it would be so much more interesting if teachers could also use the schoolyard. For instance, if you look at the environment we are here, we're at a vegetable garden. So maybe when you have biology lessons or maybe even math lessons, you can do things in the garden. You can calculate how much space, for instance, a certain vegetable needs to grow, and you can do your lessons outside. If you want more information about how to inspire your team, we have a lot of documents which could help you in that. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this talk has inspired you to go for more green schoolyards.